pre-flop range mistakes. In online poker games, your pre-flop range is your first big expected value decision. It decides what flops you can credibly rep, how often you realize equity, and how much rake you donate by playing too many marginal hands. If you want a simple North Star, it is this. Build ranges that win at showdown often enough, and also generate fold equity without burning money when you get called. Passive, hope-driven poker does the opposite. Why these mistakes cost so much expected value. Pre-flop mistakes compound. You leak a little with the open, then you leak again with the call. Then you leak the most when you hit a dominated pair and feel forced to continue. Relative strength is everything, and pre-flop is where you decide how often you land in that dominated zone. Online, this gets worse because players multi-table and punish predictable frequencies. Also, rake is always there in small and medium pots, so hands that are barely profitable in theory can become losing in practice. Common mistake 1. Calling too much pre-flop. The most common range error I see is an overbuilt calling range. The logic sounds reasonable, you are getting a price, you are in position, you can outplay them. The math often disagrees. When you call, you cap your range, you invite squeezes from players left to act, and you make it harder to win the pot uncontested. Calling also creates rake-heavy pots. A single raised pot that goes call is exactly the type of pot where marginal suited stuff looks pretty and then bleeds. First, fix. Tighten your cold calls, especially from the cutoff and button versus earlier positions. Use more 3-bet betting instead, or just fold. Second, rule of thumb. If you are calling with a hand that hates facing a squeeze, it probably should not be in your range. Common mistake 2. Opening hands that cannot realize equity. A hand like King 9 offsuit looks playable because it has a high card, but it plays terribly versus 3-bets, and when you get called, you make a lot of second-best pairs. In deep online cash, that is where stacks disappear. Realization is not a vibe, it is whether your hand can reach showdown at a reasonable frequency and win when it gets there. Offsuit broadways with weak kickers and junky suited gappers from early position fail that test. First, fix. Open tighter from early seats. Add hands that make robust draws and strong top pairs. Remove hands that make fragile pairs. Second, check. Ask when I get 3-bet, do I have a plan that is not just fold and regret or call and suffer? Common mistake 3, ignoring who is left to act. Context dictates strategy. Your range is not just you versus one player, it is you versus the full table. The biggest pre-flop blind spot is forgetting how much the players behind you matter. If there is an aggressive regular in the button and a squeeze-happy small blind, your cutoff open range needs to be tighter and more 4-bet ready. If the players behind are nits, you can open more hands and expect to realize. First, fix. Before every open, quickly scan who can 3-bet you. Tighten if you will face heat. Widen if the table lets you print. Common mistake 4, incorrect 3-bet construction. I see 2 opposite errors. First, players 3-bet only premium hands and become transparent. Second, players blast 3-bets with trash because it feels aggressive. Both get punished online. Your 3-bet range needs 2 things, hands that can stack off for value and bluffs that have equity and good blockers. A hand like ace-5 suited is not magic because it is suited, it is useful because it blocks pocket aces and ace-king and still has playability when called. First, fix. Build 3-bets with a value core, then add bluffs that either block strong continues or play well post-flop, ideally both. Second, common leak. 3-betting dominated stuff like king. Jack off suit too often versus tight opens. You are inflating a pot with a hand that makes expensive second-best pairs. Common mistake 5, set mining as a default plan. I despise set mining as a default, not because small pairs are bad, but because the typical plan is passive and incomplete. You call pocket sixes, miss the flop, fold, and repeat. That is not a strategy, that is paying rake to see 3 cards. Small pairs need the right price, the right stack depth, and a villain who will pay. In many online pools, people do not stack off lightly in single raised pots, and that makes pure set mining worse. First, fix, mix. Sometimes 3-bet small pairs versus wide opens, sometimes fold them versus tight ranges. And when you do call, know exactly who is paying you and how. Common mistake 6, defending the big blind incorrectly. Big blind defense is where people either torch money by folding too much or torch money by calling everything. You are getting good pot odds, but you are out of position and fighting rake. That means your defend range needs structure. Defend more with hands that can make top pair with good kickers, 2-pair, strong draws, and hands that can continue across multiple runouts. Do not over-defend hands that make weak 1-pair and hate pressure. First, fix. Versus a button open, widen your defense, but do it with suited hands and connected hands that can realize. Versus tight opens, cut the bottom junk even if it feels cheap. Common mistake 7, not adapting to rake and player pool. Rake is not an excuse to knit up, but it changes the break-even point of marginal calls. In many online stakes, the rake is high enough that thin pre-flop calls become negative. Expected value unless you have a real positional edge and a clear post-flop plan. Also, player pools matter. If the pool overfolds to 3 bets, you can 3-bet more. If they call too much and underfold post-flop, your 3-bet bluffs should drop and your value range should widen. First, fix. Let the pool tell you where the expected value is. Do not copy ranges from a chart and ignore how people actually respond. Hand scenario, the pretty hand trap. Game, 100 NL online, 100 big blinds effective. You are multi-tabling and want clean, repeatable decisions. Hero, cut off with king of spades, jack of hearts. Pre-flop, folds to you, you open to 2.2 big blinds. Button, a thinking regular, 3 bets to 8 big blinds. Blinds fold, you call. Flop, king of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 3 of spades. Action, you check. Button bets 3.5, big blinds into 16.5 big blinds, you call. Turn, queen of hearts, you check. Button bets 11 big blinds into 23.5 big blinds, now you feel sick. This is the cost of the pre-flop mistake. Calling the 3-bet with king-jack offsuit created a dominated top pair spot versus a strong range. In theory, you have a pair, but in practice, you're behind value like ace-king, pocket kings, pocket queens, and king-queen, and you are sweating every barrel because your kicker is not robust. You end up either overfolding and getting pushed off equity or overcalling and paying off. The better pre-flop decision is usually to fold versus a competent regular 3-betting from button, or to have a strategy that prefers 4-betting with hands that block strong continues and fold poorly to a shove, plus calling with hands that play well post-flop. King-jack offsuit does neither cleanly. Key takeaway. Most pre-flop range mistakes come from playing too many hands that cannot realize equity. Tighten cold calls, respect who is left to act, and build 3-bet ranges with a clear value core and high-quality bluffs. If your plan relies on set mining or seeing a flop without a squeeze-proof strategy, you are donating expected value in rake-heavy online pots. Now, let's test your edge. Question 1. Why does an overbuilt calling range, cold calling too much, often lose expected value in online games, according to the article? Answer. It caps your range, invites squeezes, and creates rake-heavy multi-way pots that make marginal hands bleed. Explanation. The article explains that calling reduces your ability to win uncontested pots, exposes you to squeezes from players left to act, and increases rake impact in small and medium pots. Question 2. What is the article's definition of equity realization in a practical pre-flop sense? Answer. Whether your hand can reach showdown at a reasonable frequency and win often enough when it gets there. Explanation. The article emphasizes that realization is not a vibe, it's about how reliably a hand can continue and still win, especially when facing 3-bets and post-flop pressure. Question 3. How should your cutoff opening range change when there's an aggressive regular on the button and a squeeze-happy player in the small blind? Answer. It should be tighter and more 4-bet ready. Explanation. The article's point is that ranges must account for the players behind you. More 3-bet and squeeze pressure means you need stronger opens and a plan versus aggression. Question 4. What are the two required components of a correctly constructed 3-bet range as described in the article? Answer. Hands that can stack off for value and bluffs that have equity and good blockers. Explanation. The article criticizes 3-betting only premiums, transparent, or 3-betting trash, punished, and recommends a value core plus high-quality bluffs with blockers and playability. Question 5. In the pretty hand trap scenario, what does the article say is usually the better pre-flop decision with king-jack offsuit after a competent button 3-bet? Answer. Fold. Explanation. The article explains that calling the 3-bet with king-jack offsuit creates dominated top pair problems versus a strong range, leading to difficult barrels and costly payoff or fold decisions. Study hard, play smart. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next lesson.